Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. It's not going to be a fun one. It's not going to be as uncomfortable as a couple weeks ago when we had our uncomfortable conversation, RJ. But it's not going to be a fun one.
No, it's not. I think we're going to have to come to terms with the reality of where the Kraken are in the standings. We're going to need to start looking to the future. I know many of you have already kind of started to do that from our post-game live chats and everything, but I think we're going to really have to kind of dig into what these last 16 games are going to mean for the Kraken, what they can get out of them, and how we should all kind of approach them.
Yep, definitely. So I guess we'll just go ahead and kick things off. Of course, got to thank our wonderful sponsor, Queen Anne Beer Hall. Reminder, everybody, March Madness. It's basically here. Queen Anne Beer Hall is a great place to go and watch all the college basketball games, and they are running some bracket challenge, some fun contests and stuff as well. So go check out both of the awesome Queen Anne Beer Hall locations for all your March Madness needs. And then, yeah, I mean, we normally would start with like news and notes, but a lot of it's just kind of folded into what we're going to talk about. I mean, we could talk about the Jordan Eberle 1000th game thing, RJ, but even he probably doesn't want us to.
Yeah, I think he might prefer that we don't talk about it. He definitely does not like being the center of attention. You know, he's just that kind of guy. I will say one thing about it, though. The Kraken did a really great job with the ceremony, with everything. Just first class all the way.
Yeah, no, it was a great video, and having as many people involved as possible. You know, I know you were a huge fan of the all Nickelback, you know, warm up music. That was easily your favorite part of things. So yeah, no, it seemed like a good time up there.
Yeah, I did have to be there for that one. So I know you like to be at the games. You're sometimes a little jealous you can't go to all these games. I don't blame you. That one, I think you're probably okay that you missed warm-ups.
Yeah, yes. All right. And then, I mean, well, yeah, the rest of the news and notes just gets folded into things, which we'll just start with, you know, really what this is all at, which is it's over. Right? Like the season is over. It's not probably over. It's not kind of over. It's not, well, maybe I could be wrong over. It's not, well, technically they could still match their point total from last year. Technically, it's over.
Which is true.
It is true, but they can't. It's over.
Yeah, I'm sorry to inform everybody the Kraken will not be making the playoffs this season. This homestand has made that abundantly clear. This is not a playoff team. Current playoff odds hover a little under 2% in the 1% to 2% range. At this point, their odds of the number one draft pick via the lottery are actually higher than that. So it's just the reality that's kind of going to underpin everything we talk about in this episode. And just, we got to play it straight with everybody. That's the reality. That's where it's at. The Kraken will not make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they're 11 points back, and you know, it's probably not a surprise to hear us say that either. I know, a lot of people based on the post games have already kind of come to this conclusion. They were at it even sooner, a lot of people. And for everybody else, I mean, just watching this homestand, RJ, like you said, you know, this has kind of cemented it being over. We were just talking about before we started recording. How does that happen? Like that's the weirdest part about all this, is that it's all started to fall apart here during this homestand. Like we can kind of get into like how it's gone wrong since a little while ago. I mean, remember, they were like up to 3 points being back out of a wild card spot. Now they're 11 points back. And a lot of it has to do with arguably their worst homestand ever.
I think you can make a good case for that. I mean, they have one game left against Buffalo tonight, but almost however that goes, right? I think you could say this might be their worst homestand ever just because of the situation that they're in. I mean, you go into this situation, right, where you're 3 to 5 points out of a playoff spot. Season is on the line. The whole season was on the line for this homestand. You're at home, your fans behind you, and the season just kind of dies throughout this homestand, and it just starts looking worse and worse and worse. And also the manner in which they're losing these games. The Vegas game was exciting, but as heartbreaking as it gets. And the rest of them, they have 2 goals combined in the other 3 games. They're just not able to score goals. They've been boring, bad hockey games. And I don't know that it gets a whole lot worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's nuts about it. You started off with getting shut out to Winnipeg. The 1 point you have through the 4 games so far on the homestand is the game that you basically blew, right? You allow the other team to tie it with 16 seconds left and then win in overtime. That's the 1 point you've been able to acquire. And then you drop a game 2-1 to a very beatable Washington Capitals team. And then, yes, I know the Predators are red hot and all of that kind of stuff, but you're still lifeless in that Preds game. And so, yeah, we'll see what they do with this Buffalo game to come up. But I mean, even compared to like season 1 stuff, right? Like there was probably performance wise homestand stretches in season 1 that matched with this, but like season 1, we knew the overall situation, right? The team wasn't great season 1. They struggled. And one of the big things that was great about season 1 and that helped endear them so much to fans was you still felt like they were trying and they were out there and they were going hard, even in late games, even when they were down by like, half a dozen goals. They were out there trying hard, working hard, really trying to make something happen. And I just, based on this homestand outside of that Vegas game, I don't think you can say the same thing about this team. And that's still, I think, the biggest thing I'm trying to wrap my head around, RJ, is this was a team that never said die. And this year, certainly on this homestand, they feel just like it's fine. They're just rolling over and they're accepting it. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand what happened to this group that was never like that before this season and why this season they've been that way.
Right. Each of the first 2 seasons, year 1, they never said die. They didn't have the talent to back it up. Year 2, they did have the talent to back it up, and you had some great results because of it. This year, the team is almost the same. Injuries have been a little worse, but a lot worse, really. But still, that attitude just isn't there. And certainly after the Vegas game, I mean, they tried in that Vegas game, but afterwards, they're just playing like a team that kind of knows that it's over. But I also wonder, how long can that continue? Because there's still 16 games left. You can do that for a couple games after your hopes of the playoffs are shattered in heartbreaking fashion against Vegas. But if you let that continue for another 16 games, it's going to look really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it'll look really bad. I think if it really continues throughout that stretch, that's when you start questioning who's back next season, and not just from like a coaching standpoint. Obviously that would be a conversation that is to be had, but from a player standpoint, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that makes a general manager look at the team and say, maybe I need to do a big shakeup here, because it's really not good. And it's one of those weird things of, obviously you want to go out there, you want to play hard for the fans, you want to play to try to win. Again, like we said, technically they could somehow go on a run here, and try to still make it. They're not mathematically eliminated, but you also have like personal incentives, right? Like there's contract incentives still on the line, and it doesn't look like these guys are really kind of playing for that right now. Like that's what's kind of blowing my mind right now, is just that it's none of the energy is there. A lot of the fight kind of left with that Vegas game, although I'd argue there wasn't a ton for the Winnipeg game before it either. And you hear them in the post games afterwards just being like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what we're doing wrong. It's like that stuff's scary, and that does lead me to wonder how long this could go, because we've never heard them behave or say things like that before.
Right. The lack of answers is something that we haven't really heard prior to that this season. Even in their long losing streak, they had their 9-game losing streak. Still, the guys felt like, we're doing a lot of the right things. We're just not being rewarded for it. We just can't convert, but we know what we need to do. The amount of times I heard the phrase, I don't know, from players after these last 2 games is more than, maybe in the last month combined. They're just kind of searching for answers at this point. And over a short stretch, that's okay. I understand feeling that way after your playoff hopes were just dashed, but you're going to have to find the answers at some point, certainly as easy as the schedule gets going forward. If you can't find answers against, 3 games against Anaheim, another one two against San Jose, if you can't find answers there, it's real trouble.
Yeah, that would be very, very concerning. One of the things that we can point to in how it went wrong, but besides the effort thing, right? Which, again, this feels like the San Jose game earlier in the year, right? Where it was a very winnable game and they just kind of didn't show up for it. Several of these games have felt that way. That one's a tougher one, right? Like that's one that we'll probably never know an answer to. And it's not even really something that we can even take guesses as to why it is that they maybe have had that lack of effort, or that lack of fight hasn't really been there in the way that we've seen in the past. But one of the things that we can point to is the fact that, like, look, they've just had no offense. They've had no finishing. We know that this is a team that has struggled with finishing. They don't have a ton of top goal scorers. We know goal scoring has been a struggle for them, but it's found an all-time new low, RJ, here, and that's also really concerning about all this because, again, we know you've struggled. You've struggled all through the year, but you've been able to put up more than 2 goals in 3 games before. And right now, they just look lifeless offensively. Like, chances are barely being created, and when they're created, there's no execution on them. Like, I really don't know what the answer is for the goal scoring. I know, we all want them to go out and try to find a star player or bring in a goal scorer or something like that in the offseason. I think it's going to be difficult for them to do that just because there's not many names available. But, like, you have talent on this team, right? Bjorkstrand is better than an 18-goal player. Tolvanen should be better than a 15-goal player. Jordan Eberle's only got 14 goals this year. Matty Beniers still hasn't hit double digits, right? Like, there is talent here. It's just, it's either not being used properly or they're not in sync or, for whatever reason, there is a block when it comes to them trying to score a goal. And I still, after a season of searching for answers, still can't really come up with one because they should be.
Right. Well, that leads me to a question for you, Dylan. The Kraken, they focused on playing defensively responsible hockey, and that's something that even a month or two ago we said they needed to do because that was their path to have any chance at winning.
Yep.
And I still stand by that. I think given the composition of this team, that's kind of what you have to do. But given that the playoffs are not in the cards anymore, would you move away from that? Would you change things up? I said it on the last post game. If you're going to lose fun. Mm-hmm. And I think that's especially important right now, just given the level of frustration with this team at the moment. I mean, we saw after that Vegas game, Oliver Bjorkstrand uncharacteristically smash his stick. He was upset, with a non-call from the refs, but you're seeing frustration everywhere on this team. And maybe loosening things up a little bit. Yes, you may allow more defensively, but taking a little more chances offensively, even if you're losing 4 to 5 games or something like that, maybe that helps some of the forwards kind of get out of their funk. Would you move away from that, or would you still try and embrace that defensively responsible hockey and just hope you get the bounces and score the 2 or 3 goals that you need to?
Yeah, no, it's over, right? Like, if it's over, it's over. There's no point in trying to do the defense. It's clearly not working. It's suffocated your offense. You've tried multiple line combinations. Obviously, they can move towards more. They're doing that now, it looks like. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But no, I would 1,000% move away from it because you need to. And yes, if you're not going to make the playoffs, you need to entertain fans. Sports is entertainment. Sports is escapism. This is not a fun escape. This is not entertaining. If it's neither of those things and you're not winning, that's a recipe for a disaster. And I think we're even starting to see that with the games kind of having less and less people there visibly now on television, or when I see people posting pics from the arena and stuff. Like, it's starting to have an effect on people. We're starting to have people in post games talking about fan apathy. Right? Like, that's a problem. You can't have that. So no, I'm with you. You need to, if you're going to lose, you need to lose fun. And I would start really loading up some lines to try to do stuff. I joked about this yesterday. It seems like it might be becoming a reality, but I was like, why is Tolvanen still on the 3rd line? Throw him up on the 1st line. Give him with Matty Beniers. Just see what happens. These are guys that are going to be around for a little while. See if they have chemistry. You've got 16 games here left that you can start experimenting with things and start looking ahead towards next season and be ready for it. And I think that's what they're probably shifting towards, because if you can't win, like those games against Winnipeg or the Capitals, right, where you are playing everything right defensively, but you just have zero ability to generate a chance, there's no hope anyway.
Right. And well, good news. That does seem like what Hackstall is doing, is trying out some new line combinations. I do think we are starting to see this shift in mindset from the team, that they realize it's over, and Hackstall's trying some new lines. If you look at line rushes from practice yesterday and probably what they're going to go into for the game tonight, you have Tolvanen up on the 1st line with Beniers and Eberle. And I think that's a great idea. Tolvanen and Beniers, those are 2 guys who are young enough to be part of your core for a long time. And especially Eeli Tolvanen. He's spent so much time with Yanni Gordon, Oliver Bjorkstrand. We don't know exactly what he brings away from those 2 in any kind of meaningful sample size. And now's the time to get that. this is the time of your season where you can use those 16 games that on the surface would seem meaningless to get some important information for next season that can really help you, where you don't have to just test things on the fly when the games do matter towards a playoff spot. And I think we're seeing Hakstol start to do that. And again, I like Hakstol. He seems to make these right decisions. He understands, when you need to do these things. It's not like the stubborn coach that'll never change anything. He has made changes this year. The results haven't been, well, you know what, but I mean, I see your face though. I know we're about to get to the, I'll let you get to the D pairs right now, because that's the one area he hasn't changed that I think that's next. That's where the change needs to come, and I'll let you talk about why.
Yeah, no, because that is the one thing that he hasn't changed. That's the one thing he has been stubborn on, and it's arguably been far more disastrous than the forward group. Like, yes, certainly in this last, during this homestand with the season on the line, right? You lose Vince Dunn, shortly before the homestand begins. You have one more game after you lose Vince Dunn before this homestand starts. You pick it up. It's the second half of the back-to-back. You win that game in Winnipeg. But then you come back and you have the D pairs of Dumoulin Larson up front, as your top D pair, kind of totally, sticking two defensive guys together up top. You keep the Alexiak Borgen pairing, and then you have Riker Evans comes into the lineup and he's paired with Justin Schultz. And that D pair has been so unbelievably bad, both visually and analytics wise. Like, it is atrociously bad. And it's getting, on some games, only 2 minutes less than Dumoulin Larson. Like, it made no sense to do that and then to stick with it for as long as it has. We saw it was bad in the first Winnipeg home game, And then you kept it through Vegas, you kept it through Washington, you kept it through Nashville. I don't know until Vince Dunn comes back that he won't keep it, because he shuffles the forwards. We know that about Hakstol. He has no problems throwing those lines in a blender, but to not change up the defense or at least deploy them differently, because that's the other thing you can do. Like, again, maybe the results of all of these games is completely different if you just deploy them differently, or if you have the different D pairs, because you could still play defensively and get away with it. Right now you're looking, and they lose the Winnipeg game 3-0, but that was a game that the first team to score a goal was going to win, because neither team had anything that night. The Washington game, similar. I truly believe whatever team scored first was going to win that Washington game. It just had that vibe. Nashville, that was just a bunch of weird stuff going on that, again, maybe if you're more competent defensively, you're okay through. But like, I just don't understand the idea of putting Dumoulin with Larson, load up with two great defenders, and then play them 16 minutes together, 5-on-5, 18 minutes together on like a big night for them. Like, no, you've got a defensive issue. The season's on the line. Play them 25 minutes. They can do that. Adam Larson can do that. Brian Dumoulin can do that for a short period of time while Vince Dunn's out. Like, that's what teams do in the playoffs. That's what teams do when they have their guys get injured. I mean, like, I was bringing up examples from last year. The Ducks, their season was over, but just to keep things competitive, they were playing Cam Fowler some nights 40 minutes. Right? Because like, they just needed to. He was the only guy they had. And like, you have that with Dumoulin Larson, and then you're just not going to use it. And at the same time, you're going to keep together a pairing that is sub 20% expected goals percentage in some of these games in Evans Schultz, and give them close to the same amount of ice time. Like, either break them up or you front load the ice time. The decision to not do either of those things is disastrous, in my opinion. That is the one part of all this that I will pin squarely on Dave Hakstol, because he had the ability to change that one of two ways, and it probably works out better, and he chose neither.
Right, and I can defend going Dumoulin Larson, going with those D pairs, because yeah, you do want to load up with your vets when the season's on the line. I get that. Most coaches want to do that. But you're right, Dylan, not playing them for more ice time. That's the kind of superpower that you have as a coach. You can't use it all season because guys will get burned out and tired and it doesn't work, right? But every coach in the NHL does this when the season's on the line. Well, usually it's in the playoffs, because know most teams, they're in the playoffs, right? But and Hakstol did a little bit. I mean, I looked at Game 7 versus Colorado. I looked it up, and Larson played 27 minutes. Alexiak played 24 minutes in a regulation game. He is capable of doing it. Even then, I think most coaches would do that even more to an extreme than Axtell did in the playoffs. But he just seems so averse to it. So I'm with you. And it's certainly at this point, once it's over, because I do understand not wanting to change things when you're in the meat of things and the season's on the line. And I get things weren't working and you need to change. But now there's no excuses. I think you need to, first and foremost, put Riker Evans in a position to succeed.
Yeah.
Because you've broken down in the past how that Evans Schultz D pair, just, it doesn't make sense. They're both puck movers. Evans is deferring to Schultz a lot, moving the puck out of the zone. And that's why he played so well with with Dumoulin.
Yeah.
Because, it's clear which guy's the puck mover, which guy's the responsible defensive player, and Evans can go do his thing. And I don't know about you, Dylan. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't think we've had this discussion yet. Does Evans seem a little off the last few games to you? Because he does to me.
Yeah, no, he does. He does. And I'm sure it's not right now the greatest of environments to be in, right? A locker room where you have guys saying they don't know what the answers are. You're losing at home. You're watching the season slip away. I'm sure that's tough on everybody. And it's something everybody's got to go through, but it's especially tough on young players. But yes, Riker Evans doesn't look like he's playing with the confidence that we saw from him earlier this year when he made his debut. Right, where he was decisive with his puck movements. Even if it ended up being the wrong play to make, he was at least decisive. The moment he had the puck, he knew what he was doing with it, and he made the play happen, right, that he could play. You would see him step up more and activate in the offensive zone. Not really seeing that much from him right now. And then you certainly didn't see the discipline issue that we're kind of running into now, where he's kind of trying to play more physical, but he doesn't totally know how to yet at the NHL level. And it's kind of leading to him getting into some penalty issues. So, I know Riker Evans looks like a different guy to me than what we saw earlier.
Right. And that's the 3 penalties tell me a lot too, because it's not just affecting him in the offensive zone. I mean, this is 3 games in a row. He's taken an obstruction penalty in the defensive zone, tripping, interference, tripping, and at kind of key times as well. And, I'm not pinning that all on him. It just shows that he doesn't feel like himself, even in the D zone.
Right. He's trying to do too much in the D zone is the bottom line, because again, he's paired with somebody who this year has struggled in the defensive zone. Like, we know that about Justin Schultz this year. That hasn't really been a secret. So I think, yes, in the past, we've talked about his defense and how he can play pretty conservative in the defensive zone, and that worked for him. And it especially works when you're playing with a Brian Dumoulin, or if you're paired with Adam Larsson, right? Because they're going to do the big heavy lifting stuff. They're certainly going to bring the physical play element. Justin Schultz doesn't bring a physical play element to defending, right? He's looking to move the puck up the ice, same as you are if you're Riker Evans. And I could see Evans, just because he has a more conservative mindset in the defensive zone, trying to take that on. And like I said, he's not used to it, right? He hasn't had like a ton of experience physically defending at the NHL level. And if you're going to put him out there against some of these teams that, still have good players, I know the games weren't necessarily always that great, but you're going to put him in that situation against Vegas or against a big body physical team like Nashville. I mean, it's going to put him in a really difficult situation where he's going to struggle. And I think that's what we've seen.
Yeah. Now, one more question on the D pairs. Would you break up Alexiak Borgen? Because those two have been together all season. Is that some information you'd like to know about what those guys look like playing with other partners?
Yeah, I would. But I think I called for that at the end of last year too. So
that's true. I think you did. I knew what you were going to say there, but just wanted to get that on record.
Well, but it's just like with the forward groups, right? Like, let's go for massive sweeping changes in the forward group, because what do you have to lose? You've scored 2 goals in 3 of your last 4 games combined, right? Like, there's literally 0 to lose. The defense isn't playing much better right now. There is nothing to lose. Like, why not move those guys around? Why not have like a Dumoulin Borgen pairing or something if you can, right? Where it really frees up Will Borgen to try to activate in the offensive zone a little bit more. Why not have Riker Evans play with a Jamie Alexiak, right? So he can be more of the puck mover, but he's with somebody who has some nice long reach, who can defend net front, so he doesn't have to worry about doing that, right? Like, it makes a lot of sense to do that, in my opinion, because again, you got to see what you have for next year, unless you're really just locked in and you're just like, look, my pairings are just going to be Vince Dunn, Adam Larsson, Alexiak Borgen, and then Riker Evans, Dumoulin all of next season, which is fine, I guess, but I
Well,
don't know
no,
why you
it's
wouldn't
not
wanna
even
see
then
that.
because injuries happen.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
You can't count on your blue line being as healthy as it's been really the last 2 years. This is very abnormal. This
yeah.
does not happen usually for most NHL blue lines where it's been as healthy as it has been for the Kraken the last 2 years. I feel like, I'm not trying to jinx anything, but I feel like next year that has to change, right? Just it can't go on forever.
I mean, I guess we're seeing it a little bit this year, but yeah, and you better hope that it's not Vince Dunn who gets hurt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're seeing the absence of Vince Dunn there. But yes, we could talk about that in a sec. But yeah, no, like I said, it just makes sense to shuffle things around, see how guys play with each other, do all for the same reasons that you're shuffling the forward group. You should be doing it on the back end too, because you, one, have nothing to lose, and two, it's valuable information that you'll have for the future, right? You never know what you'll stumble on until you try it. You never know what kind of chemistry there is between two guys playing together until you see them play together, right? And actual NHL game reps, not training camp, not preseason, but you have the chance to get actual meaningful NHL game reps here. You got to take that, and you got to get that information, because that information is just worth so much.
Yeah, I mean, you got Dunn Larson. You stumbled upon that after the trade deadline year one.
Yep.
That pairing hadn't really been together. It was always Gio involved there, I think, with Larson. And look what you found, and it was great.
Yeah, no. So I would certainly look towards doing something like that. Mentioned Vince Dunn being out. Somebody in the post game had posted historically how well the Kraken have been without Vince Dunn, and apologies for not remembering who it was, but it's not good, RJ. It's a 3-13-3 record for the Kraken all time when Vince Dunn is out of the lineup. That's bad.
Yeah, that is pretty brutal. 3-13-3, 19 games, you win 3 of them with Vince Dunn out of the lineup. I mean, it shows how important he is to the Kraken. And really, you said this before we started recording. He's been the Kraken's best player this season.
Yeah, he is. Like, as I was thinking about it, because I came to that conclusion on the last post game when we were talking about it, and when that stat was brought up, but it's been true, right? Like, I would argue Brian Dumoulin, you throw out the first 2 weeks, he's been the Kraken's best defensive player, right, in the defensive zone. I think Vince Dunn has been the second best, at least amongst defensemen. Vince Dunn has been their second best, defender in the defensive zone. And then on top of it, you look at all the offensive production he brings, the ability, the fact that he's kind of taken a step forward on the power play. I mean, he has been their power play guy this year when they've needed it. But, 45 points in 57 games. He's helped out the offense there. Obviously scoring, goals on a team that desperately needs it. But he's been the one guy that can kind of make the machine work, who can keep, hold the blue line, get pucks to the right guys in the offensive zone, right? This is a team that has struggled with generating chances, and he's one of the few guys who can kind of lead guys into areas where they can then generate a chance. And I think that that's just been a very, really valuable piece that they've been missing, on top of the fact that, he's been like a total stud defensively that they could lean on when they need to, and just not having him, it's shown how much he brings to this team and how important he is. And that's something that should also worry the Kraken, is that, again, not only did you lose a top guy on your defense who's defending well, but you lost one defenseman and your entire offense fell apart.
Well, that's the thing. What do you do about that in the offseason, if anything? I mean, I guess you go out and get forwards that can help, but does that make you think you don't want to go into next season with this 6 as the blue line, just given how vulnerable it is to losing that one guy? But I guess you might be able to say that about other teams that have one defenseman who's clearly the best, and when you lose your top defenseman, I guess that happens to a lot of teams. I don't know.
It does happen to a lot of teams. I think Riker Evans, in theory, provides you a little bit of insurance, right? And this is where, realistically, they should have been playing Riker Evans and just trying to slot him in as Vince Dunn. Because, throw him, into the deep end, let him sink or swim, right? And in the past, generally, he's at least treaded water. Right? Like, so like he's proven he doesn't necessarily just crumble when thrown in that spot. But then you'll also know for next year, right? Like, again, you have that information. You know if Riker Evans can be that guy, because he doesn't even need to be all of that guy right now, but you'll see enough to know that he has the potential to be that guy. And I think earlier in the year from Riker Evans, we saw that. I think right now we're not seeing that, but he's not in a position that would lend itself to him playing that way. So I think that's been part of the struggle. But I think, no, you need to focus on on people who can finish up front. I don't think you need to focus on necessarily finding another offensive defenseman. I think that would probably compound some of the problems you already have. I think you need finishers up front.
Yeah, I'm with you. But put Riker Evans now in position to do his Vince Dunn impression.
Right.
Certainly while Dunn is out of the lineup, because you never know when you're going to need it.
You're right, exactly. Like these are, like I just said, right? These are NHL game reps. This is like so vital. Teams love this stuff. Like bad teams who are out of the playoffs, that's what you use this time for, right? Sometimes you call guys up. This was year one with Matty, right? Get him in there. Let him experience NHL game speed. When it's real NHL game speed, not preseason speed, not training camp speed, an actual NHL game speed. Let them build some confidence there. Put them in positive positions to succeed. Let them build that confidence that they can enter next season with, so it won't be so overwhelming. Let them be around the group and the team. Let them learn the routine that they're going to want to have as an NHL player. This is the time for all of that. And so, yes, I think that's something that needs to happen with Riker Evans, is they need to use the last bit of the season to kind of acclimate him, let him build that confidence, because right now it doesn't look like he's building confidence. It looks like he's losing the confidence that he had built earlier in the year.
Yep, I agree with that. And that's something, as the fans are going to have to look for too. Like the results, the benefit isn't just going to be in wins and losses. It's going to be in things like that. That's a little bit beneath the surface.
Yeah, it is. And let's wait a sec before we transition into the, how we should handle the rest of the year stuff, because one of the things that I want to touch on too is transitioning back to the forward group. Again, Vince Dunn, his disappearance has meant that there's just not a lot of creativity left in the offensive zone. And that's something that is a problem. And in theory, it shouldn't be, right? I look around and there are guys on here that have played a lot of NHL minutes. These are guys that have put up a lot of points in the past, but we're not seeing them do it, whether it's Berkey, whether it's Matty, whether it's Jordan Eberle, Bjorkstrand. I don't understand. I mean, maybe there just isn't really a playmaker, right? Maybe we are going about this all wrong. We're saying that they need finishers because nobody has goal scoring, but maybe it's that they've really been lacking a playmaker who's going to set up other guys to be put in positions where they can be finishers, or finishers again, because some of them have been finishers in the past.
I still think that a finisher is what they're missing, but it is an interesting question to ask. Look, I think Andre Burakovsky can be that playmaker. I mean, he's gotten better recently. He scored 3 in his last 5, but that's, from a finishing standpoint. We saw him kind of making plays, but there was nobody he was really clicking with. Maybe Jared McCann a little bit, but nobody just, clicked to the point where they were generating a ton of offense. He still doesn't have an assist in several games at least. So there's that. But, you have Jordan Eberle. I know he was scoring, for a little while, but I see your face. He's not the best playmaker, but that should be part of what he's at least supposed to do in theory. Matty Beniers can be a playmaker. He just hasn't been kind of put in those positions to do so.
Right. Well, but I'm starting to doubt it. Because Matty Beniers can only be a playmaker, and this goes back to his college tape too, if allowed to do one specific thing, and that's roam the perimeter. Right. But at the NHL level, how often are you going to really set up things so that in the offensive zone, you're going to have your centerman roam the perimeter? Right. That's not generally how a center is going to play. So it's one of those, can he be a playmaker if he has to play in the interior, or if he's got to be below the goal line? I don't know. We've never seen it from him.
Right. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you take an off season to kind of adjust to and really dedicate your time to. I think the better thing to do is just kind of build a system around allowing him to roam around in the offensive zone, as you've proposed in the past. But still, I mean, he's not a finisher.
No.
With the shot and as predictable it is, he's not a finisher. Eberle is hot and cold, kind of unreliable as a finisher. I mean, McCann, Bjorkstrand, those are the two guys. Burakovsky can be at times.
Right.
But just none of these guys are consistent enough as finishers, except for Jared McCann, I suppose.
Yeah, no, he is the only consistent finisher.
I mean, even Tolvanen, who you think on paper, right? Because his shot is what we all knew him for when we
Yeah.
brought him in. He's become much more of a well-rounded player
Mm-hmm.
to the point where, to the detriment of his shot, actually. I feel like
Yes.
it's not nearly as dangerous as it was when the Kraken acquired him. I don't know how that happened, but the rest of his game has gotten so much better.
Well, that's part of it. Is like, are they just having all of them focus too much on being well-rounded players that like you've just taken away the magic from any of these people? Like Matty Beniers, some of that is just who he has always been. Like you go back and you listen to interviews and stuff with him at Michigan, and he wanted to be a defensively responsible guy. We knew that with Matty, but like, you know, next year it's entirely possible. We know Shane Wright will be part of the equation. We'll see if they do something else in the offseason, but it's entirely possible that they ease Shane Wright into the lineup and your top two centers are Matty Beniers and Yanni Gourde, RJ. I wouldn't consider either of them playmakers, and if you don't have a playmaker at the center position in your top six, I don't know that it's always necessarily fair to then complain when the other guys are a little bit inconsistent when it comes to finishing if they're not being put in good spots to finish.
Right. I mean, that really comes down to just the fact that Yanni Gourde shouldn't be your 2C.
Well, yes, we know that, but you know, again, if unless they bring in somebody else, I don't know that Shane Wright's going to start off getting 17 minutes a night as the 2C next year, right? Like that hasn't really been Hackstall's MO in the past.
No, it would surprise me to see that. I don't think we will see that. I think he will get eased in, and that does create some potential problems. I guess you can move McCann to center. We know that he's done that. I know you've proposed the idea of maybe moving Gourde to wing even, or playing him with the Shane Wright as a winger.
Mm-hmm.
They could do that as well.
Yeah.
I could see something like that maybe. Now, Dylan, so one thing that Hackstall has done in these new line combos is he's moved McCann back to center, tried him out at wing last game, didn't work all that great. Do you like that idea for the last 16 games or so? Would you keep him at center to keep a stronger top six, or would you move him to wing? I don't know. Where do you want McCann for the rest of the season? He can do both, but there's trade-offs.
Well, yeah, he can. I think he's probably a better player overall when he's at a center, right? Like we've seen it when he plays center, his whole game elevates because he's good in the defensive zone. He's particularly good defending the slot in the defensive zone. His PK work kind of picks up because he's used to thinking in the game as like a defending player and stuff. And we see him kind of like he's like a different guy on the PK when he's playing center, right? In those games, he's just more aware and responsive defensively. So I think he's a better player as a center, but again, I would stick with the philosophy of these last 16 games are essentially to get ready for next year. So unless you plan on having Jared McCann as a center next year, I wouldn't do it.
And it's tough because then if he's not, then who else is? And like last game, they had to resort to Kyler Yamamoto, and he's not going to be playing center for you next year. That's the thing. I look at these new lines because you got Tolvanen, Beniers, Eberle, and Burakovsky, McCann, Bjorkstrand, and it's Cartier, Gourde, Yamamoto, Tatar, Bell, Martanev. And I do think they're the best that you can do with what you have to work with at the moment, because you're trying Tolvanen out on the first line. We both talked about how we like that. And then McCann there centering Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand. I think you have to try and build that momentum for Andre Burakovsky because he's playing well. He's finally getting the bounces. He's finally finishing. You have to end the season on a high note for him, just for his own confidence. Yeah. And then you have at least a top six that looks like a respectable top six. You know, the bottom six is a little different. But I like, even with Yanni Gourde, who I think has kind of had a down last couple months, you're putting him with Ty Cartier, who maybe long-term, that's another thing. I mean, we talk about Tolvanen moving up there. How about Ty Cartier with Yanni Gourde? Like Cartier could absolutely be the third liner kind of guy that you put there with Gourde next season. So I like them trying that out. And then, you know, Yamamoto gives him a little bit of effort, a little bit of finish. And he looked, you know, he was trying hard last game. I like rewarding him by at least keeping him there. And then, yeah, Tatar, Bell, Martanev, that is what it is.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're going to do what you can. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think largely they are good. And this is probably the best lineup that you could put together right now. And that's fine. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, there's not really a situation because unless you're going to call up Shane Wright or something, it's not like you really have to be trying too much for next year. or get a
Yeah.
guy
Well, that
in.
leads me to my next question too, Dylan, and because I know you're the prospects guy, and you've been kind of keeping tabs on Coachella Valley. Actually, you got your prospect chat coming up in a couple days, so all the patrons
Mhm.
can tune in for that one. But how much would you try and dip into the Coachella Valley roster and see what those guys have? And if so, who do you want to see? Who
Right.
would you call up?
Well, it's an interesting question because, like, let me pose then a question to you. Are you worried? How much do you value Coachella Valley being like a cohesive unit and going on a run as they currently sit with the second best, the second best team in the AHL? Like, do you care about you know wrecking that potentially by taking players out of that environment, having them have to reorganize their lines and all of that kind of stuff? When this is a team that looks like they can be right back in the AHL championship game this year, all for a trial run with the Kraken for a bunch of guys that realistically probably aren't going to be part of your plans next year anyway.
Well, I value the Firebirds' success highly, and they matter the most at this point, really, as far as playoff success that we're looking at. I just don't know how much it's actually going to throw them off just for 2 or 3 games to bring up. You're not calling up 2 or 3 guys at a time. And this is something they're used to. This is something the Kraken did toward the end of last season a little bit, where there were Firebirds that were coming up and down. Ty Cartier,
Yeah.
even through the playoffs, right? They were bringing him up, and it's just something the Firebirds had to deal with, and they were able to successfully navigate. They
Mm-hmm.
made it to the Calder Cup finals. They were 1 goal away from winning the Calder Cup. So, and especially knowing that there's an end date to that as well, and they'll have a little time to get everyone back together again too. I just don't think it'll mess them up that much, but I do think you want to do it with intention.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you want to call up guys just to call guys up. Like, Max McCormick, leave him down there. Any veterans, like, leave him down there. I guess I'm just looking at players like, obviously Shane Wright and Ryan Winterton are the two that you think of first.
Yeah.
Shane, you can't really play for more than a few games, but I wouldn't mind having him come up for a few games at the end of the season, just 2 or 3 games.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah.
I think that'd be good for him, given you will see him next season.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience can be there. Ryan Winterton is another guy who I think has an outside chance of making the roster. He will play as a Kraken at least a few games next season.
Yep.
So Wright and Winterton are the two that I would think about. But maybe a Ville Ottavainen. Just give him a little taste at the NHL level and see what he can do. He's impressed at the AHL level. Mm-hmm. I don't think it would hurt him. I don't think it would hurt the Firebirds that much. I think they could survive it. Maybe even like a Logan Morrison type. It benefited Ty Cartier, I think, to come up. So I would think about those guys.
Yeah, I was going to say the two names that come to mind for me is Cameron Hughes and Logan Morrison, because those are two guys that I could conceivably see be Seattle Kraken next year. Right? Like that's then kind of where you have to start looking. Ottavainen, maybe he does well and he becomes, your scratch defenseman, right? Like, there's not really going to be a ton of room for him next year, but it's entirely possible that the Kraken are going to have to fill in a role or two on, say, the fourth line, right? And that seems like something that could happen, particularly if they're able to go out and maybe get one big free agent acquisition or trade for somebody, right, for the top six. Then there's going to be holes most likely further down the lineup. And I think of, Cameron Hughes plays such a fun and complete game, right? He could come in and one, like I said, just be fun, which is something the Kraken kind of need right now. He would be energy. He would get that room a little, little more happy, I would imagine, and just bring some life to it all. But Logan Morrison is the guy that every time I watch Coachella Valley play just impresses me so much, because he just looks very similar to Ty Cartier. He just looks like a bottom six NHLer. Like, that's just who he is. And it's just natural to him to play that style of game. It's natural for him to have a north-south approach where he's just going to come in on the forecheck, or he can carry the puck across the line, right? Like, he'll just do either, and he'll do either at a level that is good enough for the NHL. It's not going to, he's not going to light the lamp a ton. He's not going to do any of that kind of stuff. But I think Logan Morrison is the next Ty Cartier, as one of those kind of bottom six guys who is just going to be a solid guy you can depend on and kind of throw in different situations, and he'll give you, his best at it. And so I would look at maybe rewarding Logan Morrison for the work he's put in this year, in his rookie year in Coachella Valley. I think that would be something that would be nice for them too.
Yeah, and that's another element to it is just rewarding guys who have put in their time and put in the work and had a good season at the AHL level. And so I think there's something to that too, where even if it, might throw off the schedule for a few games or whatever, you're rewarding these guys with a game at the highest level,
Hmm. Make a dream
achieving
come
their
true.
dreams. Yeah, exactly. And in a lower pressure situation than maybe for like a Ty Karche last year where he's getting thrown into the playoffs. But I think might be good for them as well. So I would like to see at least one of those guys get a call up over this time.
Yeah, and then just I mean, I don't know, maybe I save it for next week, but just talking about like the Kraken offensively, right? Like, is it? I don't know. You know what? I'll save it for next week. We'll just do that as a teaser. But like the idea of them not having necessarily a playmaker to help out guys, to put them in finishing positions, and also not really having anybody that's going to, screen the net or be physical or kind of create disruption net front that's going to pull defensemen away to help generate those chances, get guys a little bit of time and space when they're not playing along the half boards or way up high in the zone, because that's the other issue that the Kraken have is they just, like I said, they're not putting any of these guys in positions to be finishers really. So I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised that they're all struggling to finish.
Yeah, I guess so. And there's no one from Coachella Valley that would do that aside from maybe a Shane Wright, but that's a whole other conversation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like I said, we could talk about that more next week and kind of get more into the X's and O's of it, because I think with the about 15 minutes that we have left, we should talk about where the team goes from there and where we as fans should kind of go from here too, right? As we're saying that the season's over and things have you know this is where we're at, as far as having a higher percentage of the first overall pick than making the playoffs. Where do we go from here? We've talked about the team a decent amount here, right? Like what they should do and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything else you want to talk about from their perspective before we kind of approach ours?
No, I think we've just about covered it. Now we just have to look at, how how you approach these last few games, whether it's as fans or even as media. Like, it's kind of a different vibe there in the room right now.
It is. So I mean, a big obvious question first, RJ. Do you root for losses? Right? If you're not making the playoffs, it behooves you to lose as many games as possible because that's how you end up with the best draft position. So let's just get the big question out of the way first. Should fans start rooting for losses?
As much as I hate to say it, we may disagree on this still, and I don't think we've really talked about it a ton, but I've always been in the camp of yes, and it's unfortunate that they have to. I think the system is the problem, but as long as wins hurt you at this point, I don't think you want to look completely unmotivated. I think you want to see that fight from the Kraken.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're just hoping from a really well played game where you got to hand it to the other team and maybe a bounce goes against the Kraken, and that's how it goes. I hate to say it because especially this early, the Kraken have only been playing. This is their third season. You still need wins, especially at home. I guess maybe you root for road losses and try and win some games at home at least. But it's just a really tricky situation. But I think in the long term future of this team, wins hurt you. You're talking about a draft pick that could be anywhere from 8 to 15 or so, and there's a pretty big difference between those two spots. And then there's the lottery odds too. It could get higher.
Right. Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I think there's benefits to playing well the rest of the way, even if it does hurt your draft position. I think, like I said, the confidence for next year, finding things that might work, whether it's a defensive pairing or two guys clicking on a forward line, something like that. Letting your goaltenders finish strong, right? If they can get some more wins under their belt and play well, maybe grab a donut or two along the way. Like, I think those things are good, and it puts you in a better spot for next year. So I don't know. It feels wrong to root for losses regardless, even if the system does reward it. And even if I'm not on the side of thinking that the system's as broken as you think it is. So like that's what's kind of weird about this whole situation. But I think there's benefits. Ultimately, I think what you're looking for as a fan is this team to start looking like season 1. Where they are going to lose most of the game, so it helps you out draft position wise, but the team is fun and the team is clearly playing for the fans, because that's what that season 1 team did, particularly down the stretch. They were in it for the fans just as much as the fans were in it for them, and it was just kind of like it was still an okay time, right? We managed to find ways of having fun around the losses. We managed to find ways of watching the team try their hardest and play well and all of that good stuff. And so I think ultimately, if you're a fan, you probably want a repeat of how kind of season 1 ended, where there was some highs and there was a lot of stuff that gave you hope for the future, but at the same time, they ended up picking 4th.
Yep. No, I like that parallel too with season 1, because they did lose a fair amount of games down the stretch. But you also had some kind of marquee wins to remember, right? They beat Colorado 3-2 in April, and that was huge, knowing how good they were. And I think it helped build some confidence for the next year when they end up playing Colorado in the playoffs.
Right.
Just knowing that even that team could do it, and you could work to get wins there. That shootout win against New Jersey where Matty Beniers scores his first goal. I know you were in the building for that one. Yeah. That was huge. And then closing it out too at home with the fan appreciation night shutout win against San Jose.
Right.
That felt like a party afterward, right? Remember how happy everybody was?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Like it was a fantastic way to end that otherwise difficult year that last little bit. I mean, their first 3-game win streak was in there. Like there was good moments to it all. And it, like I said, it left a good taste in everybody's mouth after a season that shouldn't have. And that's what I'm kind of hoping repeats here a little bit.
Yep. And then also, I hate to mention this, but getting the job done in the actual last game of the season that shouldn't have been against Winnipeg, where you go up and take a big lead and find a way to lose it in regulation, which nobody cared about that game.
No
one cared about that game. And it ends up getting you Shane Wright. Yep. So, it's all about kind of picking your spots, I guess. Not that the team was doing that necessarily. They're trying every game, but it's about the games landing in the right way, I guess. And I guess that's what you're looking for.
That is what you're looking for. Like I said, you want entertaining games. You want games where you feel like the guys are out there and trying and that they can do stuff sometimes, right? And that's the key of what's been so bad about these last couple games is it doesn't necessarily feel like they're trying as much as we've seen them try in the past. They're not doing anything entertaining. They're barely scoring, right?
Yeah.
If they're
and also
scoring,
you look
that's
at
the stuff you don't want.
Year 1, you look at the last 10 games of the season. In each of those games, they scored 2 or more goals.
Yep.
Never were they left with 1 or 0 goals.
Yep, that's what you want. You want them to, in theory, continue losing, but at least do it fun and do it with some action. So you have something, if you go to the game, you feel like you saw something, right? Like that's what you need. That's what you need if you're a fan base. Because if this just continues and yes, they lose and let's say they end up picking like really high because of it, it won't matter because think of how many people will have been lost along the way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like already I think about that just with the 3rd year season ticket plans going up, not to bring this up for the umpteenth time, but it's a very relevant thing for the team. I wonder what the beginning of next season looks like, or if they come out and they stumble a little bit at the beginning of next year, what the reaction of everybody will be, just because if this season ends and continues to be this sour, it's going to be really hard to bounce back easily from.
There is a lag to that as well. Even if you start to have success where if the fans are kind of disengaged, it takes a little while. There can be underlying things. Look, we're seeing that kind of with the Winnipeg Jets, even as because last season was really tough for them. They go first round exit. It seems like they're going to sell off. I think there was a lot of apathy among the fans, right? Mm-hmm. They come out this season. They're fantastic. They're near the top of the division. They're doing great, but the attendance is still kind of lagging. And I think it just takes some time for everyone to get back on board, even if the team has improved. So you do have to, give the fans some hope going into next season.
It's the fool me once thing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
You can fool me once as a fan, but you start fooling me a bunch, right? And then you become the Seattle Mariners.
Oh, no. I was hoping we wouldn't get a Mariners reference at any point during this podcast.
I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. But it's the thing that you do have to worry about. And obviously Seattle supports the Mariners just fine. I think Seattle is such a unique sports city that it won't matter as much as in other markets, right? As much as like in a Winnipeg or something like that. But it is something where, Seattle sports fans have options. Certainly while the Seahawks are still playing, you've got lots of options. And so that's something that the Kraken have to think about from time to time. I don't know. And then as far as, looking at things here, they're right now, they would be picking 11th. RJ. But there's
Mhm.
definite potential for them to move up out of that, as they're kind of in a group with New Jersey at 68 points in the standings, Buffalo at 69, Pittsburgh at 69, and the Kraken at 68. The Kraken have games in hand is the thing to start looking at there, as we shift from looking at wildcard standings to draft pick standings. That's what's got Seattle kind of below the other three teams at 11. So, I guess we'll find out tonight, right? What direction this game against Buffalo goes, because that's an important swing for them.
It is, yeah. Those two teams right next to each other there in the draft lottery standings. So yeah, we do kind of shift to looking at that as well. And as long as you don't have to be that bad, I feel like, to end up just at the bottom of that group. These teams are all right around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can I don't think you can really go higher than 8. Montreal, you're already 7 points ahead of them. They're
Right.
with the 7th pick, right? I think that's probably as high as you can go. And just talking in realistic terms, 11 is the last pick where you have a chance at all in the lottery of getting the first overall pick in Macklin Celebrini. It's about a 3% chance, so it's not much. But with the 8th pick, you move up to a 6% chance of winning the lottery, get first overall. So, small chances either way, but that's kind of what we were talking about.
Hey, you're doubling your odds. Who wouldn't take that in Vegas, right?
Yep, you can double. The Kraken can double their odds of the first overall pick. But I still think Dylan, you know this much better than I do, because you've been looking at the draft prospects and the draft board and everything. How much of a difference is there between 8 and, say, like 12 or 13 if they win more?
It is a big difference, right? Because you're talking about getting more of a difference making forward, or a real like top pairing stud defenseman, versus somebody who maybe has the chance of being a difference making forward and maybe has a chance of being a top pairing defenseman, right? Like that's where the difference starts to kind of bleed out for me. Is like, I think there's a very clear top 8, top 9 maybe this year. And so I think as long as the Kraken kind of pick in the top 8, top 9 if possible, you're going to get somebody that I think is going to be a really good player. After that, I think it starts becoming more like, well, in the right situation, this guy could turn out to be a star, or stuff like that, and it starts getting a little bit more dicey. They're all still going to be great players, right? If you're picking in the top 15 in most drafts, you're going to find a very serviceable player, but it's also the difference in, top 5, 6, maybe 7 this year. Looking at it, you're talking about somebody who can help out the team, maybe not next season, but the following season, versus if you end up picking at 11, 12, you're talking about 2 seasons later, right, in their timeline too. And that also starts becoming something that the Kraken need to look at as well. So I think this year it does behoove them to, in that pack that they're in right now, finish as low or high, depending on how you're looking at it, as possible.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and it can make a big difference when you look at just historically too. The picks at each spot. There is
I was gonna say,
kind
do you
of a
have the
higher
value
level
chart up?
Oh, I do not.
Because that would be the other thing to look at while you try to pull that up. Is I wonder what the difference is from, say, 8 to 11 on a draft value chart. Just because I can imagine that's probably right around where things start, that you see like that second major drop off. Well, outside of the not counting the first to second drop off.
Right. So this is from The Athletic, the like game score value added thing. Basically, assigning a point value to each draft pick. Now, the first overall pick has a value of 17.7, to just give you an idea there. The 8th pick has a value of 6.7. And then, say, the 12th pick would have a value of 5.5. The last pick of the first round would have a value of 2.7. So you're looking at a difference there of basically a mid-second round pick, I guess.
Yeah. So that's substantial.
It is.
Like, again, it's the difference between a guy that you're expecting to be a top tier player versus a guy that you're hoping becomes a top tier player. Like, that's to me the difference, at least within this class. Like last year, that pick would have been lower because that draft class was so stacked. But looking at this draft class, that's kind of how I view it. So I think the Kraken, best case scenario, if they could get as high as possible, it would be nice in this draft class. I think it would matter for them in this draft class.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your take on that too, because I have not done any draft research at all, and I realize I'm gonna need to start doing that a little bit.
Just don't watch Celebrini. He's so boring. He's a robot. Everything's picture perfect, and it's boring.
Okay. So do the Kraken want to win the lottery or no?
Yes, no, he's going to be a very, very good player. He's just not exciting at all.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, he'd
fit in well.
This is how I would describe him. If you put me on the spot and needed like a quick log line for scouting report on Macklin Celebrini, he's a kid who had access to all of the top skill coaches growing up, and he listened to all of them. Like, he got good, but it's all just textbook good. There's no like magic to it the way there is with like a Bedard, right? Where like there's that magic to like he just makes stuff happen. Celebrini doesn't just make stuff happen. He's just always in the right spot, and then his shot is textbook perfect and it goes in.
Hey, you know what? If it gets the job done. But yeah, okay, way to get people not excited but not too excited about the prospect of the draft lottery.
I will. Yes, we'll see if when the Kraken win the lottery, RJ, and they're in the spot to draft him. We'll see if I can find some stuff to be more excited about with him.
There you go.
Be a good problem.
Dig into
to
the
have.
Personality. I don't know.
Yeah, would be a good problem to have. Hey, West Coast boy, that's always good.
That is always good.
That would be important. Have a West Coast boy on a West Coast team. All right, so I think that's going to do it for us here. Thanks everybody for listening. Of course, want to hear everybody's thoughts on all this kind of as we do transition into the season being over. What are you looking at? Right? What are you thinking as a fan approaching the last 16 games of this season? Are you rooting for losses? Are you rooting for wins? Do you want them to finish strong, even if it's going to hurt their draft position? Because I think there's a very good argument to be made for that. So I'd love to hear all that stuff in the comment section or on the Discord, Twitter, all that kind of great stuff. So thank you all for listening, and also thank you to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring the podcast. Reminder, March Madness on. Be a great place to go and watch games all day, RJ. Just all the screens, get the good food, just endless basketball. I know that's not your thing, but for a lot of sports fans it is. I think it would be a lot of fun to do that there, and we will see everybody next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Absurdly Sane, Alaska Joe, Alex, Alvi, Andrew, Anonymous, Anthony, Beef, Ben, Brad, Bryce, Burnt Creme, Caden, Kat, Kaylin, Chandler, Charles, Shazzle Dazzle, Chip, Chris, Christian, Clutch, Cody, Connor, Coop, Corey, Cutter, Dan, Danny39, Denise, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Evie99, Eli, Elizabeth, Empty Net Hockey, Ethan, Evan, Fusion Mix, Gaby, Gabrielle, Gary, Gregory, Helena, Habak, Jane, Jenna, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Julia, Justin, Katie, Kepler, Kevin, Kitty B. Kraken, Cole,
L. Bell, Leanne, Levin, Light, Little Tennis Guy 8, Lonnie, Mac and Cheese, Maeve, Mark, Max, Maya, Michael, Michelle, Michigan Kraken, Nick, Night Drop, Noah, Nori, Nunya, Olivia, Paige, Patty, Paul, Rayanne, Randall, Rebecca, Robert, Rock Liquor, Ryan, Sarah, Scott, Sia Kraken, Sean, Sergey, Sergeant Pickles, Shannon, Skeletal Tendency, Steven, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Team 114 Chris, Ty, Virginia, Wendy, Where the Slovakians At, and Zoe. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.